Hello and welcome to You OK Man, a weekly men's mental health discussion. My name's Elliot.
I'm Jake.
And I'm Tom.
And you okay, man? All right, I'm gonna talk about a little bit about my week first, if you guys don't mind.
That's cool.
Because this week I had my first therapy session.
Oh, how was it?
Congratulations.
Yeah, which was good. It was really good. She knows what she's doing. She's trained to do it.
That's good.
We ended up talking about a lot of stuff that I didn't realise was affecting me and stuff like that. So, but I want to talk a little bit about the process of getting a therapist, because that's it's quite a hurdle for a lot of people, I think.
I can imagine it's quite daunting as well.
Yeah, absolutely daunting, because you kind of don't really know what to expect, right? And I was basically recommended this there. So one of the big things I struggle with is dissociation. So feeling like I'm sort of separated from my body and I can't really process what's happening in front of me. The best way I can describe it is it's kind of like being drunk, in that you know what's happening, but you're kind of a second or two behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was recommended a therapist who specialized in dissociation, which is great because I knew my problem. I knew what I wanted to fix. And so I could find the therapist that was going to help me. But I think for a lot of people, you don't know the exact thing that's bothering you, right? So it's sometimes harder to find that therapist that suits you, because it very much is finding a therapist to suit you. And the only way you can find that out is by testing different therapists out. So you don't really know if you're going to be compatible with a therapist until you've talked. But talking with a therapist costs money, and in a lot of cases it costs quite a bit of money, like anywhere between 50p to £1 per minute. So you could be spending between 25 and £50 a week just testing out therapists, which I know for a lot of people isn't feasible.
Economical, it's not feasible at all, no.
Exactly, especially as students, it's really, really difficult. But I was very lucky that the first one that I found I got along quite well with, and I'll talk about the first session in a bit. But I just want to talk about a little website that actually my girlfriend found that helped her to kind of try and find a therapist that she suited. And I think it's called BetterHelp. And it's an American website, but there are lots of other services like it if you do a little bit of research. But it's a website called BetterHelp, and it's basically a subscription therapist service. So you pay £35 a week, which isn't cheap, but they do student discounts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it basically, rather than having just one session a week at the same time every week, you basically have access to their services. So they have a whole roster of different therapists who are all trained in different things. So they have some who are trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, some who are trained in reality theory, stuff like that. And different therapists have different ways of therapizing you. And that's one of the big things to kind of get used to and find. And so that you have this big list, and you can kind of contact them and work out which one might work for you. And then you can basically just have lots of tester sessions with different ones, and you can just switch counselors or therapists as and when you need. And it seems like a really, really helpful service. One of the problems, it's based in America, so the timings when like people are online and stuff like that means that you're either doing it early in the morning or late at night.
I see.
That might work.
It sounds like Tinder for therapists.
Yeah, you can kind of swipe left, swipe right.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. And so
but it's helped you. It's helped you.
Yeah, having a therapist has really helped me these past couple of weeks. But that website, BetterHelp, was a really accessible way for my girlfriend to find someone who suited her, because she wasn't having to spend £50 every time to try and find one. She just paid the subscription, which is $35 a week, but it's cheaper for students. She just had to pay that subscription, and then she could just dot around as she needed to that week. And you're also able to text and instant message them if you're not able to call them. Like through any time in the week, you're able to do that, and then you get to call them when you can as well. So as a website, really good way of looking it up. And I think there are other websites which are based in England, but I've not had a chance to look them up yet. So I can't personally recommend any other than that. but yeah, in terms of my first session, it was really interesting because obviously, like, I kind of think I know what's going on in my head, and sort of I'm aware, obviously, of all the events that happen in my life, right? And I've forgotten some things, but that first session was basically her talking me, like, asking me questions about my life, and I basically explained my life from being born to today, right? Going through all the major events and school and how that was and relationships and stuff. And
Fair play for remembering all of that.
Yeah,
it was
getting through it all.
it was tough, and like, but like she asks really good questions that do kind of prompt your memories, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
So she's a professional; she knows the questions to ask.
That's what therapists do.
Yeah, exactly. That's what therapists do. So I ended up remembering things I'd forgotten. But so she kind of then had this timeline, and basically ended up then sort of connecting these dots, right, and saying, okay, well, this then links to this, and it's sort of a weird experience because it's like a connect the dots. You can see all of the dots in front of you. You know the story of your life, but then, you know, if you get a professional therapist to come in and just kind of go tick, 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 and connect all those dots, and then the picture becomes clear, and you kind of get this much clearer picture of who you are, and why certain things affect you more, and why certain things give you more anxiety or upset you more.
Yeah.
Because you can be like, oh, well, obviously this is connected to this, and it comes back to this again. And it was really interesting. So it was a week ago yesterday that I had the first session. I had the second session today, but the first session is what I want to talk about, because it felt like a connect the dots, and it was really weird leaving that session and kind of having a bit of a clearer picture of what goes on in my head.
Yeah, like, did you come away not straight away with a clearer answer, but like an understanding of where things had come from?
Yes, obviously you don't come away and you go, oh, my life all makes sense again. But you kind of come away and you have that picture. It's not colored in. Maybe that's how I'll say it. You've got a picture and it's not colored in, but you've got a picture. And throughout the week, I was kind of bearing in mind the things that she brought up, and little things which happened throughout the week I could then look at and go, oh, well, that makes sense why that bothered me more, or that makes sense why I was struggling with that more. And it just, clarity is the best word I can say. It just felt like things became a little bit more clear, which was really good. It was.
And
really,
had you ever experienced that clarity before?
Not really. I did some free therapy sessions with the university with an enabling service, and they were okay, but because they were free and because I only had you're only allowed 6 sessions, it was kind of difficult to get anywhere. And again, I don't think I really clicked with the counsellor that I got through the university, but it's definitely worth trying to go and get those 6 sessions from enabling, because you're entitled to them, and there's no harm in it. But
having done the 6 sessions from enabling before, I mean, I think they're really good, and I think even they even say at the end, if you need more, they'll signpost you off to the NHS and sort of their elements as well, of mental health. So when university does restart, I would fully recommend utilising enabling services systems for crisis and for mental health.
Yeah, I think they'll probably be quite busy, but I think they'll be expecting that, so they'll be able to deal with a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's difficult, is you also can't really, going through the NHS is really difficult because they are critically underfunded in mental health. And so that makes it difficult. It means there's not many doctors and nurses that are trained in it. And so to kind of get on that wait list is quite an infuriating thing, which is why I think so many people turn to private. But then it's it can get really, really expensive, which sucks. And
that's it, isn't it?
Barrier.
Yeah, it really does suck that as a barrier, because it shouldn't be a barrier. But at the same time, the therapist that you are seeing, they're working. Obviously, they need to earn a living. So it's all one big problematic circle. But going back to you, it's really, really good to hear that you've found a therapist that's correct for you and you're seeing clarity. But also, I want to caveat that with, it's brave, the fact that you've jumped and you've actually gone to to this step to actually get the help. For a lot of people, it's not easy to do that. I know people who, including myself, who sit there and go, I don't need it, I don't need it, I don't need it. And when you finally come to that realization, and it comes after a lot of denial usually, where you tell yourself, actually, this isn't going to be any better if I don't get any help, and you go out and you reach for that help and you get it. That's the first step in a long journey to actually recovery.
Yeah,
And you're on that journey now, mate.
I think that point
well done.
about denial is really valid. Like, because you kind of go, yeah, well, I'm coping, and other people have it worse and stuff like that. But that's just not valid. Like,
no,
you don't go, I've got a broken arm, but some people have 2 broken arms.
No, you don't. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
just don't go to the hospital. Let your arm heal on its own. It is, though. It is. It's one of those things, and I know we've been doing this for 5 weeks now, but mental health is just as important as your physical health. In fact, even more so, I would argue.
As a point, I would say that as a general rule, if you're questioning whether you should or shouldn't go to therapy, go to therapy. Like like obviously money is a factor for a lot of people, and that should be taken into account. But if your debate is whether you should or shouldn't, as a general rule, you should. Like it's not going to harm you. But also a lot of GP surgeries have what's called a mental health nurse. So they are a nurse who is specifically trained to deal with mental health problems. So you can go to your GP and get a GP appointment specifically to talk about your mental health. And then you'll be able to have a medical professional, a nurse, assess you and kind of figure out what your next step should be. So they can advise places to go and free counseling that you can take on and stuff like that, as well as you can go back for mental health checkups with that nurse regularly if you want. And it's the same as making a GP appointment. So that's definitely something to look into. I know Highfield Health in Southampton, which is all of our local GP, they definitely have a in-house mental health nurse. But if not, your GP will be able to direct you where to go. But yeah,
Good.
That was my experience with therapy. Therapy is great, gives you some clarity if nothing else. And if
and it's great to hear that you're moving forward with it as well. That you found someone that clicked straight away, and that you're already feeling a lot more clear with it, which is amazing to hear. It's great news. That sounded so sarcastic. It really did. Honestly didn't. No, no.
I've had friends who've spent a year or even a year and a half, bouncing between different therapists to try and find the right one. And it really is a case of the right one. If you do have a therapist and you're like, well, this isn't working for me, it's probably not because therapy is not for you. It's probably because the counselor isn't for you. But yeah, so that's kind of the biggest thing in my week. How's your week been, Tom?
It's been good. It's been a happy week, actually.
Good.
I've moved back. It's Tuesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. So last Monday, I came back to Southampton to my uni house where I've been living. At first, it was weird because going back into my old room as well, obviously all the stuff with my ex was kept, and like photos and cards and all that. So it was weird going back and seeing all that and having to clear it all out. But I've moved into my housemate's room, which is the biggest room in the house. So I now have a lot more space. And going from the tiny room I had just to this room, it's a lot lighter. It's a lot bigger, a lot more space, comfier bed as well. So it just feels like a happy move, and I feel a lot better here compared to when I was living just me and my dad for all of lockdown. Just being able to come out here by myself, having like a different perspective on things. So yeah, moving away from my dad, not having to look after him, not having to worry about what he wants or me doing things that might affect him, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's just all focused on me, and I'm seeing still got uni mates down here as well, so I'll go to Common and see them sometimes. So I'm not always alone, but then if I want to be alone, I can be alone, and I really like my setup here, and it's really cozy, and I've got a house to myself.
Good. I suppose that independence is quite important as well, especially if you felt, because obviously not saying that your dad was trapping you, but there can be a sense, especially if you're stuck in one place, you might feel trapped with your dad, right? Like you're not allowed to leave the house. You're always around each other.
I want to add to that. it doesn't necessarily mean you're stuck in one place. I think it gets doubly worse after a long period of time when you're used to your freedom being stuck with your parents or a parent, because obviously the insinuation there is they brought you up, and you were sort of following their lead and their orders, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the rules rather, for growing up. So there's always the connotation there of, oh, there are things that I can't do around my parents. So living with them for 3 months, or living with your dad in this case for 3 months, I would argue that's the bit that was more trapping than being in the single place.
Yeah, no, the independence is definitely refreshing. And it's not because of who my dad is as like a person. That my dad as a person is great, but it's a fact that it's living with a parent. If my parent sees me still playing video games for the 6th hour in a row, I probably shouldn't be doing
hate
it
me.
anymore. Yeah, exactly. So now I can do it here without being judged. Not that I do that anyway. I'm a healthy person. Don't worry. But yeah, that's it more or less.
No, that sounds good. It's exactly what Jake says. I think you there's almost a tendency to kind of regress. Like you've spent 18 years in a living with your parents, and you're used to that way, and then you leave, and it's kind of refreshing, and you go to uni or you go on a gap year, and you're living by yourself, and it's new and it's exciting and you're independent. And then I found this, especially even before lockdown, I'd go home for maybe Christmas, and I'd find myself regressing. Like I'd stop cleaning up after myself, or I'd be worse at doing the dishes, or I'd forget how to cook. Like it's just you just kind of regress, and it's natural when you're in that environment where you're used to being a certain person. But I think that's probably something which I've also experienced during lockdown that I didn't really pick up on before.
When did you find that you started struggling, Tom? Was it after how many weeks, after how many months, sort of?
In lockdown?
Well, yeah, in lockdown, yeah.
I was never struggling all the time. I'd have my good moments and my bad moments, but I think when did I go through the breakup? I'm trying to remember all the dates, but it was probably 3 weeks into it was the final week of the actual lockdown when I thought, okay, I don't want to be doing this anymore. This is no fun. I've got to be back by myself and doing what I like.
As opposed to being, you had enough. You were fed up of being sort of in that environment. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Because there's only so much you can do when I'm with my dad. Not emotionally, but just physically as well. I can't, because when I'm here in Southampton, I run around the house singing, blowing music out as loud as I want, and that's a way of just not escaping.
Do you know what? That's the one thing. That's the one thing that I know when I'm free I can do. I can just plug my phone in. Well, I can't anymore because it's broken. But I can plug my phone in to the speakers. I can just jam it up to the top volume and just play it out. And no mum, dad, nan, granddad, dog is going to get annoyed at me, because maybe the neighbours will, but nobody. My responsibility is there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the parent comments as well. He's like, they're not saying anything, but you can tell in their head they want to treat you like a child again. Yeah. And it's nice to escape that.
Mum, if you listen to this, I'm sorry, but
it's not a bad thing.
As an adult, these are things that we go through.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing at all. It's just moving. It's a weird phase because as a student, I'm half leading an adult life and half going back and being a child again with my parents whenever I go see them. And it's just finding that balance of switching between. And even my dad says it sometimes when we used to go visit our grandparents. He'd be like, I'm regressing into my child form again. I'm thinking I can't say certain things, even though he's 50 years old and he's got his own family.
Oh God, I really hope I don't experience that.
No, it's a natural thing, isn't it?
So the other side of what you were saying was when you came back to uni, you were sort of reminded of that state. So if we talk about regressing back home, do you think there was a part of you that then regressed when you came back to uni?
Into, what do you mean, into other state?
Back to when you were still with your ex-girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
So I just to kind of talk a little bit about what that was like, because I know you kind of had got to comfortable place in your head with the breakup. Do you think moving back there and back into that room had an effect on that?
No, I think because I've been thinking about it a lot and got real comfortable with it out in the lonely bits of New Forest. So when I came back, I had like a strong foundations, the cheesy way to put it. But no, it's just like, it wasn't like I've seen all these things and I'm being like triggered back into the good old days bit. It was like, that happened. That was a nice bit, but it can't happen anymore. And it was sad for like maybe an hour. Not even sad. It was just like
reminiscent.
Reminiscent, yeah, that's it. Reminiscent's the word. Yeah, but it was just like, there were cards up and pictures, and it was just like, that was a nice time.
It makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, I think I'm also trying to verbalize what it is, because I know exactly that feeling, and it's not even that you are like, I want to get back together. You're just kind of sad that a time when you were together is gone, and not in the sense of I want to get back together, but because even if you got back together, you wouldn't be in that place you were. More in a sense of you can never get back to that place, and that's sad.
Yeah, that's an extreme way of putting it, but yeah, it's just like, I agree with what you mean. Like that was a real comfortable time. I felt happy then. That was comfortable, and I feel happy and comfortable now. But that was a different comfort, happy. Not no more, no less. But it's just some different place now, isn't it? But that's my week. Overall good week, which I'm pleased with.
Good.
How about should we move on to Mr. Willis, Jake Willis?
Yeah, hello. Well, I'm no longer working full time. That is the big headline of today's. We're recording on Tuesday. Of Monday was the big headline, and it still hasn't hit me yet. I am very much not in the mindset of. I don't really know where I am. I'm still waking up. The sleeping pattern's still the same. I'm still waking up ridiculously late.
You are.
I woke up at 4 o'clock today, as I did yesterday, as I did the day before. So that's something immediately that needs to be sorted out. But yeah, I'm no longer working full time, and I'm very much not aware that is the case yet, if that makes sense. It's like lagged. It's lagging behind. The impact of this has not hit me yet. And so I don't really know how to act at the moment. I'm so used to working that I'm just lounging around doing nothing, and it's I don't feel particularly bad about anything. Although there is one thing that I'll get onto in a moment that I have been thinking quite heavily about. But I just feel very lethargic, very lazy, very. I don't really have a direction. But again, the sort of the sadness of not having a full-time job and the perhaps mental health impacts and implications of that have not yet caught up to me. So in regards to the story that we've been going through, or rather the journey we've been going on for the past couple of weeks, I don't think I'm anywhere further on that than last week to really comment on. The thing that I have noticed though, and this is something that I've previously discussed about how I'm capable of blocking the news out and not really letting it affect me. Well, I've noticed that since I've stopped, and it's only been Sunday, Monday, Tuesday that I haven't been working, the news has actually been having an effect on me. Okay. I think this might be this might be the first thing that is catching up with me, and that is. Certain things that have happened in the news have been making me rather upset. So the big one is these protests, these Black Lives Matter protests, and sort of everything that's going on, surrounding them. And when we were sort of covering it at LBC, we were very much, I guess, very much in, obviously it's there, we're being bombarded by everybody talking about it, but when you're there and you're on the phones and you're talking about that, you sort of blank it out everything surrounding sort of the wider story, and you focus on taking the cause. So you take the word of what people are saying to you. Obviously, if you can't verify it, you don't put them through. But if somebody's talking from their experience, then you know, and they're a person of color, I want that person to go on air because that experience is important to me. Therefore, I've blanked out all of sort of the wider process out. I want and I'm looking for a specific thing relating to the program.
You feel like a part of the news that's going on and a part of delivering that, as opposed to a person observing that. And now that you're not working, you're observing that.
Well, I mean, I will still be working, obviously, on the Sundays, and when I come back into it, I just haven't had the chance to go back into that yet. But as it was 6 days a week beforehand, I was working. It's now 6 days a week I'm not. Yeah, I feel as though I am much more of an observer, as you described, than I am a part of it.
So I think a key part of that then, because it's something that I think probably a lot of people have struggled with, is because there's a lot going on. And I think personally, my way of dealing with that is making sure that I am always up to date, so I don't feel like I'm not doing my duty and staying on top of it. But it's making sure that it's in short bursts, and that it's not always kind of the doom and gloom. So I've been trying to seek out creators that are showing a solution rather than just problems, and showing the problems, and that can kind of help me feel a little bit more hopeful about it. So yeah, I don't know whether that might help you. How
I think so the way I've been sort of processing it is I've been sick. I've been processing it. I've stopped looking at the news, essentially. I only look at the headlines of the day. I don't look at any more news than that. And I think that's helped me significantly, because I'm keeping up to date with the sort of the gist of things, but I'm not going into detail, because the minute I go into detail, it's the minute I start getting upset. Because again, when I'm a part of it, I'm just absorbing that information just to know it. When I'm outside of it, I'm absorbing that information, and that information has an effect on me. Because
do you think that's not the same as when you're working though? Do you think just taking the headlines doesn't treat it as real, as opposed to just a story?
So this is how it's really bad, because we're almost taught not to treat it as real when we're working. Because if you do treat it as real, then it's going to upset you. There's only so much bad news that you can hear of. Riot, or not necessarily, well, riots in America, yeah, but in this country, sort of the unrest with the far right and all of that in regards to those protests. There's only so much you can read, and sort of you sort of have to disassociate from it. Because if you don't disassociate, and you put yourself in the situation of, well, that's happening and I don't like that, or it's upsetting me, then you're going to get upset, and it's going to affect your sort of the way you go into that situation on the phones and you work. So you have to disassociate.
I think that's why I'm trying to find creators who are providing solutions rather than just reporting on it. So I think I also feel overwhelmed when I just see it being reported as, here's more videos of people being abused by the police, and here's more videos of people in pain, and here's more protests. I think finding those creators and content providers that are looking at solutions and looking at ways forward. I can't remember for the life of me her name, and it's really annoying me. But she was on the BBC yesterday, and she was a black writer from America, and she was basically talking about, look, like, this is happening. We can't change that. It's all well and good reporting on the fact that this is happening, but it doesn't help to just keep saying this is happening. And what we need to do as a society is say, how can we correct this? The main one that I found to help me is Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. He's really good at condensing it and then putting a where do we go from here. But
I do enjoy John Oliver's sort of I guess commentaries on different issues. Yeah, and he's good. And to be fair, that sort of thing does cheer me up. What I was going to go into though is, I mean, as we described, I've had to disassociate, and now reassociating is sort of getting me upset. The problem that I've had over the past couple of days, and I've had many debates about this with different friends, some who've vehemently disagreed with me, is that I obviously support the cause of Black Lives Matter. I'm
Right.
anti-racist. I despise, the fact that, Black people disproportionately experience racism and multiple other discriminatory acts in this country. But then I'm also an historian by trade.
Mm.
And this is where I've been torn for the past 2 weeks. And it's that as an historian, and we're talking about the statues being pulled down,
Yeah.
I'm taught, and I've been taught through training, and maybe this training has been incorrect, and maybe I've interpreted it in the incorrect way, and perhaps I'm completely and utterly wrong. This is just the way I stand on this.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been taught that statues and things like that are an embodiment of history. And in my head, them being torn down is almost like a hostile act against history.
Mm-hmm.
Hear me out. I'm not talking about the politics of all of this. I'm
Yeah.
talking about how this has had an effect on my mental health. I completely understand the side of Black Lives Matter and wanting them torn down. And I completely understand the historians' argument who are in line with me, who don't want them torn down. I support the Black Lives Matter cause, but I also don't particularly want the statues to be torn down. So I'm fucking torn. Sorry for swearing. I'm torn
Yeah.
in the middle of this
Yeah.
sort of like thing. And my mind is being like sort of just pulled apart.
Yeah.
And I hate it because I don't want to be on a side, and I don't have to be on a side either. But then there are people saying you do have to be on a side, and there are people saying you can only be on one side. And I'm just very much like, oh,
Yeah. So I think it's difficult because like especially when so as a very quick thing at the start, the way I see it is statues glorify history, books remember history. No one's
yeah.
going to forget the acts they
And
did.
people
But
agree with that.
I think personally that statues of slave traders should be taken down because statues, in my mind, glorify history, and having them up means that as a society we are trying to actively glorify and remember people who perpetuated slavery. But in terms of what I think you were talking about at the end is this idea that where is my responsibility as a white person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that again is something that I've been struggling with because it can feel as a knee-jerk reaction to be like, right, you're tearing down statues, you're destroying in America, you're destroying buildings and shops. Are you attacking me? Because this is a society I live in. Does that mean that you're coming for me next?
So I don't think that line for me is correct. I simply think that as an historian who has studied empire specifically, the British Empire, and completed my master's in it, I've always been taught that yes, statues are a glorification, but also they're an embodiment of the time. So aesthetically speaking, they are an understanding of that period of time through said person. And obviously said person, when they're a slave trader, not very good. But this is the taunt. So obviously I despise the person, but it's the history of it's the history that I don't want destroyed. It's simply that. And that's where the tearing in my mind comes.
I think,
and obviously I know we're running out of time here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but so my mental health is being affected by the fact that I want to support everybody, but I can't, and it's just like, oh.
But so as a historian, you must understand then that whilst they were important figures of history, the actual movement of history, right, the reason why England could profit and grow in those times was down to Black people, right? So I think that's where that comes from, is people wanting to make sure that it's the Black people that are being recognized for their work.
And that's completely what I want. I mean, just to end this one, I think Banksy had a great idea, and that was to put that statue of Edward Colston back on its plinth and commission another statue of the people who dragging it down. And I think that would be amazing, because that is developing history.
I think that's an interesting take on it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I had one more thing to talk about, and that's just played with my mental health. And like, that's just something that I'm going to have to come to a conclusion to. And I'm educating myself and I'm learning, and hopefully I can come to a good compromise. The final thing and it's going to be very quick, is that
Good.
I
Less than 30
experienced Nigel Farage got kicked off of LBC.
Yes.
And the program that I work on literally comes straight afterwards, normally.
Right.
However, the program got extended because Farage went. So I took the abuse of all of Nigel Farage's callers on Thursday, I believe it was. Yeah, last Thursday. And it was the final program that I did with that show. And it was, for lack of a better term, possibly the funniest hour of radio I've ever had to experience in hindsight. I thought it would have a tremendous impact on mental health, but it was great. And I just thought I'd end on that. Good. That was great. That's the highlight of my week.
I'm glad you could take something good from it, because that sounded rough. But yeah, okay. Well, we'll wrap up because I think this is going to end any minute. But thank you so much for listening. Sorry, it's been a bit of a rushed ending. We'll fix it by next week. I've been Elliot.
I've been Jake.
And I've been Tom.
Thank you and goodbye. Thanks for listening. Please remember that none of us are professionals, and if you do need help, please seek professional advice from either your local GP or any of the established charities that I'll leave in the description. If you want to see what else we're up to, follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Jesting Dog Productions.